Okay, class, today what we're looking at is solving systems of equations by graphing. So far we've looked at lines. We know how to determine the equation of a line, and we also know how to graph lines. So today we're solving what they call systems of equations by graphing. So exactly what is a system? So, you know that systems exist in many different forms other than just in mathematics. But when we're talking about mathematics, it's when we take what we call two or more equations. In this case, it's going to be lines because that's what we're studying, but it wouldn't have to be just lines. It could be other equations. So we're taking two or more of these lines, and we want to, in this case today, graph them, and the answer to a system is where they intersect each other. Okay, so our purpose of today's lesson is we're going to graph lines and see where they intersect. And where they intersect, if they do, is our answer for today. So let's take a look at a real world question, or as close to the real world as we can get. So here we have Mac is offered two sales jobs. At the first job, they will pay him $500 per week plus 5% of the sales he makes. The second job he's offered will pay him $250 per week plus 15% of the sales he makes. Okay, so just looking at that, it's very difficult to determine which one is probably the best. So for instance, if I look here, if he sells nothing, he's going to make $500. On the second job, if he sells nothing, he makes $250. So the first thing that we would probably consider is how we choose the one with 500, and because we would think that that would give us the most money. But the real difference then is the sales he makes. There's a huge difference also between 5% and 15%. So let's take a look at this. Now, things that we need to consider. What does the point of intersection mean in this case? Well, I'm going to graph his first job and see how his income goes. And I'm also going to graph his second job to see how his income goes. So the point of intersection in this case would be when both jobs earn the same amount of money. Now, there's also things like what factors does Mac have to consider? Well, the factors we'll discuss afterwards at the bottom of the page, because there are numerous factors when we're talking about this kind of job situation. So one of the hardest parts about graphing, and I'm just going to get rid of this for now, is coming up with the actual axes, like what numbers to do. Now, you can see I've already added the lines, but I actually am going to get rid of them in a second as soon as I figure out how I'm going to do that. There we go, properties. And I'm going to make it actually disappear completely. And the same thing with the other one as soon as I get my cursor on it. So you'll have to bear with me. Come on, there we go. So I'm going to get rid of both of those just so you can see what I've done here. So along the y-axis, I've put the money. And so for each square, I've used $100. So that by the time I get up 100, 200, 300, 400. So that's what you need to do on yours, and it's going to take a while, and probably the supply teacher will have to stop, and that's all right. Along the bottom is where I'm going to put the sales. So obviously at 0, 0, it would mean that in this case, 0, 0, he would get nothing and he sells nothing. But we know, that's why there's points here, we know that if he sells nothing, the one job's going to pay him $500. And if he sells nothing with the other job, he's going to be paid $250. So we're just going to leave that there for now. So if the supply teacher wants to stop it so you can get these numbers on here. So pause, beep, beep, beep. Okay, so now that you have those numbers, let's see how I graph this. So let's look at his first job. He is paid $500 if he sells nothing. So along here, so at $500, I will have a red dot. Then how do I get the other things? Well, let's say, for instance, he sells 1,000, because I'm not going to do it for every single amount that he makes. Let's say 1,000. So how would I calculate if he made $1,000 in sales? How much money would he get? Obviously, he would still get his $500. So if I bring this here, so he would make $500 plus, it says 5% of his sales. So if he sells $1,000, 5% of that would be multiplying by 0.05, because we take the 5% and turn it into a decimal. When we actually do that, we see that he's going to make $550. Okay, so here's 500, 600, so about halfway through. Okay, so then let's try, what if it's 2,000? So same kind of idea here, except now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this 1,000 to 2,000, and when I do that, you know that he's going to make, if you take your calculator, 500 plus 2,000 times decimal 0.05, he's going to make $600. So it looks like every $1,000 more, he makes another $50. Okay, so from that, then I can actually draw my line. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of some of that information in a second. Now, let's look at the other job. The other job, I know if he sells nothing, he makes $200. At $1,000, he's going to make 1,000 times the 15%. So 1,000 times 15%, so he's going to be making another $150, so that takes him up to $400. And then again, I calculate again, and so now what I have is I have enough dots in order to draw my lines a best fit. Now these lines will be exact, so that is fine. And because I had the lines there before, I'm just going to go back and get it. There we go. So I cheated. So what I did is I actually get rid of that dot, however, and it doesn't want to go, and that happens sometimes. So you can see that the first job actually is pretty good. He makes a fair amount of money, much more than the green line. But then there comes a point where the green line is going to be on the top. And that means that at that point, he's going to be making, and if you notice I'm extending that green line, if he sells a lot, he's going to be making a lot more money than the red line. So when we're looking at solving this type of question, we're actually solving to see when's the best time. Okay, and you can see the point of intersection for both of these lines occurs approximately here. So he will make about $650 when he sells $2,500 worth of product, whatever that is. So my answer to what does the point of intersection mean in this case, it means this. He makes the same amount for either job, and what he makes is $650 selling $2,500 worth of product. Okay, so that is what the point there means. Okay, so which one would you suggest Mac chooses? Well, that's where those different factors come into play. Okay, first of all, okay, and I do have some written down here. First of all, what's he selling? What's he selling? If he's selling cars, well, then it should be no problem. But he's not going to sell maybe a car every week. Is he selling candy? That might be easier to sell, but to make $2,500 worth of candy sales might be difficult. Okay, so what is it you're selling? Is it going to be hard to sell? And another thing, not everyone's a good salesperson. Okay, Mrs. Brodhagen is not a good salesperson. So for me to have a situation like this, I'm probably going to be better to take that red one, that first one, because I don't sell very well. Okay, another thing might have to do with location. Are you selling in Mitchell? Are you selling in Toronto? Are you selling in Stratford? So a combination of those factors, what are you selling, where you're selling it, might have a huge influence too on which one you would choose. And do you know anything about what you're selling? Okay, if you're going to sell cars or even bikes, maybe bikes might be better with the amount we're talking here. We're selling bikes. Do you know things about bikes or not? And do you have the right personality for selling things? I don't know. Only you know that. Okay, so that's the first situation that we're talking about. So now there's going to be a second video that you're going to watch for the second page of the note.